Right, so welcome everyone to the Morden Community Forum. Great to see you all here. I'm going to just ask our councillors to introduce themselves quickly, their name and their ward. So,
Hi, I'm Councillor Helena Dollimore, St Helier Ward.
Councillor Jennifer Gould, Cannon Hill Ward.
Hello, Councillor Nick McLean, Cannon Hill Ward.
Hello, Councillor Eleanor Cox, the Lower Morden Ward.
Hello, Stephen Mercer from Morden Park Ward.
Good evening, Sally Kenny from Lower Morden Ward.
Good evening, James Williscroft from Lower Morden Ward.
Hello everyone, it's Councillor Stephen Allen Breetis, Ravensbury Ward.
I'm Councillor Natasha Irons from Figs Marsh Ward, here to talk about waste.
Yep, and I'm Councillor Caroline Charles from Ravensbury Ward. Right, our first speakers are the local police from Wimbledon Station. So we got PC Matthews and Sergeant New. So if you'd like to give us a talk, yeah.
Good evening all. I'm Sergeant Jeff New and I've been asked to give a policing oversight to the Morden Community Forum as I oversee the Cannon Hill and Morden Safe Neighbours team. To my right is Sean Matthew, who's part of the Mountain Park Safe Neighbours team. My apologies if the speech is a bit short, as we only found out about this meeting today because colleagues that should have been coming couldn't. All uniform officers are now working out of Mitcham and Police Station, which is now also the sole parade site for all response team officers. We're still waiting to hear if Wimbledon Police Station is being retained. That decision is set up with the Mayor of London. The new Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has been speaking publicly on his desires and his intentions for what he wants to achieve in the MPS in the future. Neighbourhood policing is at the forefront of his plans for us to be able to better support our communities. A Safe Neighbourhoods team covers each ward and is comprised of a sergeant, 2 police officers and a police community support officer. Their role is a blend of community engagement, crime prevention, investigation and enforcement in support of colleagues in other departments. They should be a visible presence in the wards, be it out on foot, outside the school gates at drop-off, attending community events, and be the officer doing local inquiries if there's been a break-in. In terms of engagement, all the wards have functioning ward panels comprised of local residents who meet with the team every 3 months to help set the team's policing priorities in conjunction with the results from virtual surveys sent out with local residents. The teams are also playing a role in canvassing for and maintaining the neighbourhood watches, which are well represented across most of the wards. All the teams have regular drop-in surgeries of welcome to all, as well as having an online presence both on Nextdoor and Twitter. The team also have an email database of all residents, which is used for crime alerts, witness appeals, and to flag up other incidents. If you're interested in getting involved in Neighbourhood Watch, a wall panel, or being signed up to the team's email database, please let us know or email your local team. To find your local team online, visit the MPS website, select Safe Neighbourhoods, and enter your postcode. In terms of the priorities for Cannon Hill, they've got 3 priorities, which is the reduction of antisocial behaviour in open spaces, the reduction of vehicle crime, which is keyless theft of motor vehicles, catalytic converter thefts and opportunistic thefts, and reduction of burglary. The actual crime figures are low and they are consistent with last year compared to this in terms of comparison of February, January and December, more recent having 11 burglaries in total, whereas last year it was 9. Theft of motor vehicles again is consistent with a total of 7 crimes this most recent period and 6 the year before. Theft from totals 12 across 3 months, whereas last year was 9. Morden's priorities are antisocial behaviour, in particular Morden Park, with car meets drug misuse, motor vehicle crime again, and reduction of speeding. And to this end, they've been holding speed watches in the area. Their crime stats are similar in that over the past 3 months, to date, there have been 11 burglaries compared to 6 the year before. Theft of motor vehicle offences, 9 more recently, compared to 2 the year before. And theft of motor vehicle, 11 compared to 11 the previous year. In terms of the burglaries that the wards are experiencing, there's daytime offences where the premises have been entered from the rear. And there's also nighttime offences where sheds are being targeted to steal bikes. Of the motor vehicle offences, in a particular trend is keyless vehicles, which are being targeted by criminals who are able to dupe the car into believing that they are the rightful owner, or effectively cloning the key. Those vehicles are turning up all over the country, or on occasion being shipped abroad. The teams have been handing out Faraday pouches to try and prevent the theft, and we're also giving out the advice to install steering wheel locks to prevent the thefts. Amongst that trend as well is catalytic converter thefts, which is a nationwide issue not helped by the rising cost of some of the rare metals used in their construction. We've carried out recent events to property mark catalytic converters and also fit anti-theft number plate screws at the same time. More of these events are planned. The vehicles being targeted tend to be the hybrid vehicles like Honda Priuses, Toyota Auruses, Honda Jazzes, Honda CR-Vs, and certain Lexus models. The market events will not stop the theft, but will help police identify the stolen catalytic converters. There are also devices that are available that can be fitted to underneath your car to help prevent the theft, called cat clamps, that cost between £100 and £350 depending on the car. The cost of replacing a stolen catalytic converter can often mean that the car is written off as an insurance claim. Both wards also experience some theft of motor vehicle offences, which is where motorists are leaving the car. Cars unlocked at evening. In the past year, 3 different men have been sentenced for. So 3 different men have received custodial sentences for stealing from cars. We would remind motorists to lock their vehicles.
Good evening, everyone. My name is PC Shaw Matthew, and I represent the ward of Morden Park. My sergeant has gone through a few of the issues and circumstances that we have obviously gone through on all 4 wards. What I'm going to do is just briefly go through the stats for Morden Park. What I'm going to do is compare February 2023 with January 2023. So a quick overview would be burglaries in February. We had 1 burglaries in January. We had 8. Theft in February 4. Theft in January 11. Theft from motor vehicle 0 in February. Theft from motor vehicle in January 1. Theft from motor vehicle in February 0. Theft from motor vehicle in January 0. Shoplifting in February 5. Shoplifting in January 2. Public order is 5 in February. Public order in January is 5. Criminal damage in February is 2. Criminal damage in January is 4. Sexual offences in February is 1. Sexual offences in January is 0. Robbery in February is 1. Robbery in January is 1. And lastly, assaults in February is 4. And assaults in January is 7. I'm just going to run through quickly the ward priorities we have in Merton Park. So we have 5 priorities. The priority number 1 is robbery and violence in Morden Town Centre. Priority 2 is ASB, rowdy behaviour, drugs, and patrol parks and open spaces. Priority 3 is burglary. Priority 4 is speeding. And priority 5 is creating a visible police presence. Now, I'm going to quickly transfer to Ravensbury and just quickly go through their ward priorities. So priority 1 for Ravensbury is violence and robbery in Morden Town Centre. So that might have changed because of the boundaries. So priority 2, complaints in relation to drugs and ASB in the parks. Priority 3 is burglary. Priority 4 is speeding, mainly along Bishopsford Road and St Helier Avenue, Middleton Road. The current policing priorities for Ravensbury for violence is to regularly patrol to increase during late turns, intel used to identify within the peak offending times and locations in order to maximise efficiency and resources and to deter violent and robbery crimes. 2 is drugs and antisocial behaviour, to patrol parks. 3 is burglary offences, which usually increase at night time. There'll be high visibility patrols which continue within burglary hotspots. Residents will be offered crime prevention surveys, and these will be advertised on social media and at ward panel meetings. Speeding on Bishopsford Road, St Helier and Middleton Road. This has increased since Merton Council has brought in a 20 mph limit across the borough. Our aim is to reduce these complaints by carrying out speed watch events involving safer transport teams and with our members and communities. We have a neighbourhood watch coverage, which is controlled by Joy Land, which introduces the whole of Merton Council neighbourhood watch. And we have Mike Brownell, which is the coordinator for Bishopsford Road. Current issues, emergent issues are robberies of school children between Lillyshaw Road and Mitcham tram stop along Bishopsford Road. Sorry, finally, I'm just going to go through a quick overview of the crime stats for Ravensbury. So from January 2023 compared to December 2022, crime has gone down by 11.8%. And in the 12 months ending January 2023 compared to previous 12 months ending January 2022, crime has actually risen by 5.5%. And lastly, Merton Park, January 2023 compared to December 2022, crime has risen by 12.5%. And in the 12 months ending January 2023 compared to previous 12 months ending January 2022, crime has risen by 11.4%.
Right, thank you both very much for your update. Are there any questions? I think we have a question from Mr. Hart. Is he online, Chris? Or... Oh, Mr. Hart, hello. Yes, would you like to ask your question? Thank you.
Got it. There we are. Okay. I think the question I was going to ask would be unfair because Sergeant New is here and it's a matter he knows about and it's too direct for a meeting like this. So I have a more general question, which is given the bad publicity the Met has received endlessly this last year, as to whether or not within the Wimbledon area there is any initiatives proposed to try and restore public confidence.
Yeah, and are there any other questions? Oh yes, Helena.
Thank you for your report and all of your hard work in the wards. My question is about catalytic converter theft, which we know is on the rise. I just wondered whether you had any advice for people on how they can protect themselves against that kind of theft. And I appreciate that this is a broader emergency services question, but we always take the opportunity of the community forums to remind people about the offer of the free home safety visit from the fire brigade in London. You can fill out the form on the website and they will come to your home, check your escape routes, install smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah, I will. Okay.
So just a quick question. You mentioned that there was an increase in properties being entered from the rear, which is obviously quite alarming. And obviously during summertime, I expect more people are going to have the backs of their homes open so they can enjoy their gardens. So it'd be good to hear a little bit more about what's causing that and what protection we can offer and advice we can offer to residents.
In terms of Lower Morden, we are talking low numbers for residential burglaries. Sheds are now included in terms of the terminology for residential burglary. So the nighttime ones, which are obviously more concerning, they're targeting cycles in the sheds. The daytimes tend to be where there's rear access, a shared alleyway, and once they're around the back, if there's no one in, they've got times of forced entry. So anything that residents can do to prevent people getting to the back, if there's a shared alleyway, getting together with a neighbour and erecting a higher fence, and the more they spend on security, the better their property will be secured. If anyone's got any concerns around general property, they can request a local team come around and give out a crime prevention visit, and that's free. Going back to the catalytic converter question, that's a hard one. Because of the value of the metals used in the construction of the catalytic converters, at least with the older models, that they're apparently worth £500 to the thief in terms of resale. So the catalytic converter marking will help prevent the resale of those items, because we'll be able to identify which places are accepting what is a stolen property. In terms of the prevention, the CAT camps, as they're called, is the best prevention, because it actually helps prevent the theft. The actual theft itself, from seeing footage of it happening, it's a minute and a half in terms of the actual process of them taking the catalytic converter. When they've been confronted by residents on Lower Morden Ward and others, the occupants, who typically wear masks to help or to prevent identification, will threaten people with violence. The vehicles they're in are typically on false plates. So whilst you might have ceased to be of them doing it, the cars on false plates, they're wearing masks, so it makes identification very difficult. When I cover a response team, what we will tend to do is put one car to the location of where it's happening, and then any other units we've got available to that area, because we anticipate that they're going to do 3 or 4 in an area before they leave the borough, and they'll literally carry on driving around until they filled up the boot. And when police vehicles get behind them, typically they don't stop either. So there's no easy answer in terms of that. There's stuff online about parking. If you're in your driveway close to the wall to prevent them jacking up the car. CCTV, parking under street lighting. However, where these people are doing it in broad daylight as well, the best suggestion I've got for people is to invest in these cat clamps.
Oh, right, Councillor McLean.
Is your one on? There we go. Look, thank you very much. If I could just follow on from Councillor Cox, actually, because I know that it was the burglaries from the alleyways at the back was raised at our last Cannon Hill panel, Safer Neighbourhood panel, and I have actually, and it was about whether or not the council still operates the Alley-Gate scheme, and indeed, after contacting officers, they do. So we do actually, the council. So maybe that's also highlighting to residents through our media channels to be able to, residents that haven't put in the alley gate to protect the alley that runs behind their houses, then that's probably a good move. I'd also never ever fail to take the opportunity with senior officers here to thank our Safer Neighbourhood team of PC Young and PCSO Sandra Wood in Cannon Hill, who are absolutely excellent, and we are so lucky to have them. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Stephen?
I'm not sure that the resident's question has been answered.
Could you just repeat the question?
Yes, the simplified question is there any plan or process for trying to restore the confidence in the police that the papers seem to say has disappeared?
So at the moment, obviously we have a new commissioner, and his plan, obviously I don't know if you've been watching the news lately, but there has been a new department that's opened, and a hotline to call if you suspect an officer is being corrupt or underhand. There is more vetting going on in places. So basically we are trying to clamp down on the issues which have been obviously brought up in the news.
I follow on from that. Where to start? The MPS has rightly found itself in the media spotlight and being held to account for the actions of a number of serving officers which have damaged the reputation of the MPS and the public's trust in us. It's rightly caused a senior level review, which Baroness Casey has been undertaken. She's been present on Morden Borough as others. That started in February last year and is expected to finish in February of this year. The review has the intention of establishing whether the MPS's leadership, recruitment, vetting, training culture and communication support the standards the public should expect. The report and its communications are expected over the coming months. Commissioner Rowley has been vocal since taking over in September in terms of the changes he's looking to implement in the Met around the issues of standards and culture, also how much more we can do to reduce crime. He set out a 9-point plan, which is available online. I'm happy to go through it now, if need be. What I would say is that obviously there's an officer from Merton, Reese, that's found himself now serving a 4-year custodial sentence, who we both used to work with. From the moment that allegation was made, within 48 hours, he'd been arrested, charged and remanded, and was effectively in front of a judge. So anything, if there's a criminal allegation made against a police officer that stands up to scrutiny, there's no hesitation in my mind, or the officers at work for me, kind of in terms of the outcome, but that's going to, what's going to happen. But building the confidence of the community back after the recent events over the past couple of years is not going to be easy, and it's not going to happen overnight.
Yes, Councillor Cox.
So just one final question from me.
Oh, what's it? Doesn't seem to go on.
To be honest, but,
all the wards have a policing priority associated with the reduction of violence and, in particular, antisocial behaviour in the wards, the parks and the open spaces. Tackling violence remains a top MPS priority, including those crimes mentioned that disproportionately affect women and girls. As part of the tactics to combat this, the MPS has introduced Street Safe, which is a service for anyone to tell us about places where they feel unsafe because of the environment or some of the behaviours they've experienced at a location. It's expected that once a report has been made, that the MPS will then work with partners to address the environmental issues if present at the location, and will deploy officers to address the issues present. The Met has also introduced Met Walk and Talk, where women working and living in London can walk and talk with police officers to share their thoughts on safety and how to bring that positive change. In terms of the Met website, for both, you can report Street Safe or kind of sign up to the Met Walk and Talk. And these, of course, complement any recording of any assault. Incidents of sexual assault and indecent nature are scrutinised to ensure that all evidential lines of inquiry are actively identified and followed. If there is, they're also looked at in terms of whether or not there's a linked series. Such instances are thankfully rare. From my knowledge of the Morden area, there was a serious sexual assault on a young male adult in Morden Park in July 2022, which remains a live inquiry where the suspect is yet to be identified. There was a more recent serious sexual assault of a young teenage girl off of Stonecott Hill on the 19th of January, where that chap was arrested, charged and remanded within the week. Going back to the summer period in Morden Hall Park, May to September, there were, from memory, 5 indecent exposures in Morden Hall Park, where again that male was identified and has been charged, and that also remains a live criminal investigation. So thankfully the instances are rare, but could the Met be doing more around it? Yes, we can.
Right, I've just got a quick question myself. I was just going to ask, what are you doing about graffiti? Thank you.
I'll take this one. Lower Morden has a graffiti artist, and I use the word artist loosely, called Nasty J, or that's his tag. It's in red ink. We've done an environmental visual audit with the council. He's tagging Lower Morden Ward in particular. We've done the usual route of inquiring with schools, both on this borough and neighbouring boroughs, to see if anyone knows that tag. And in terms of local inquiries, we've identified that the male concerned is in his 20s and a white male, but to date we haven't found out who he is. Once we do find out who he is, then he's up for multiple charges for all the criminal damage he's been causing. I know that the Lower Morden team have managed to secure, I believe, some funding to get some of the damage repaired, but as yet he's still doing it.
Right, thank you. And has anyone else got any other questions? Oh yes, yeah. Please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a resident of Merton Park Ward, so I'm aware of Sean and his work in the Merton Park Ward. I'd just like to follow up something that Councillor McLean mentioned about the Alligate scheme. Due to some criminal behaviour in Merton Park via back alleys, I made an approach on behalf of a number of residents to Merton Council about the Alligate scheme to see whether it was still live. The response still remains in the ether. So there was never a response from anybody in the departments I contacted via email. So I was interested to hear that it is still live, and I think it would be helpful if on the minutes a note could be made of which department deals with it and how to deal with it. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that Merton Council, we are getting a lot of graffiti in Lower Morden, and Merton Council are pretty good at picking it up. And James and I are always out and reporting it, and it does get cleared quite quickly. And I would like to say to the police, Lower Morden had a terrible incident of 43 plus cars damaged in one session, but the police responded very quickly and they caught the two culprits. But it's caused a lot of discontent in Lower Morden, but you can't control the actions of certain people, but for them having been caught, perhaps would be a deterrent to others. And the Alligate scheme, it comes out in April and there's only about £25,000 per year for it. And that money's already gone for this year. And it is, whereas it was a very prolific activity and you got it done quite easily, it's now quite difficult because they think most people who want the Alligates have had it done. And I want one too, but I've got an objector who won't, and we just can't get it done because of one objector, and I've challenged that and not managed to get that changed at all. But it's still possible to do it, but you have to do the footwork yourself. But if you've got an objector, it's tough.
Are there any more questions? No. Right. Well, thank you very much for your presentations and for updating us and for all the good work you do. So, yes, thank you very much for that. So you're welcome to stay for the rest of the evening, or if you wanted to leave now, it's up to you. But yeah, thank you very much for coming. Thanks. Right. The next item on the agenda will be the Cabinet Member for Waste and Street Cleaning, who's going to give us a presentation. Yeah. Oh, well, we're going to do it after Councillor Irons' presentation. So, yeah, because she might have to get away. So, yeah. So, Councillor Irons, over to you.
I'm going to stand up because can you hear me? Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. I'll make sure to let you know. So this is just to take you through the decision we made on Monday to for the future of our waste services, and that decision was to split the service, to outsource our collections, so our wheelie bin collections, and to insource the street sweeping. My clicker work? Where am I pointing? I'm going to have to say next slide, please, and remind you all of COVID. So just to say, so I'm Councillor Tasha Irons. I'm the Cabinet Member for Local Environment, Green Spaces and Climate Change. So this is kind of primarily what I've been focused on over the last year or so. So if we just take a moment to think about what are some of the issues we've had. So when we first outsourced the contract, it's fair to say that the primary driver was to save money. The council was in a position where it had to make savings and very quickly for various reasons around budgets and austerity and things like that. So the council decided to outsource its services. But what happened with that is that we had quite a loose specification. We had a specification that kind of allowed the contractor to say how and when they kept things clean, so long as it was kept to a certain standard and bins were collected. We also, though, outsourced part of the contract management to the South London Waste Partnership, so we didn't have control of that. That has changed. We have brought that back in already. So any improvements you see, that's because we've already taken back that part of managing the contract. And we didn't have a lot of flexibility in the current specification, the current provision. It was very prescriptive, very this is what you paid for, this is what you get, and that's it, and quite solid in terms of what we could get out of it. And as a result, we've had quite a negative experience with this service, and we've had to work very hard to try and get it back to where it needs to be. So next slide, please. So when we made a decision in October to end our current contract with our current supplier, Veolia, the first thing we did was launch a resident consultation into how people are feeling about the service, so we could understand what people wanted to do. Now, we had over 2,500 responses. That included telephone interviews, online interviews, library, in-person surveys, and we had some focus groups as well. We also had some pop-up high street stalls, and so thank you for everybody who took part in that. Next slide, please. So what that told us was that when we looked at all the results, it told us that we actually our bin collections are quite solid, and I've said this in many forums. I know that by saying that, I'm inviting people to go, no, my bin was missed and it's not perfect. I'm not saying the service is perfect, but I'm saying that it's in a good position, in that in the main, people are quite happy with the containerized solution we have, and the fact that we can do recycling at the curbside. So that sits at about 63% satisfaction rate. There's obviously room to improve, but we're in a good place with that. What isn't in a good place is our street sweeping. So when we outsourced, it was at 53% satisfaction, and it's declined ever since then and not recovered. And we had a really low satisfaction rate with that when we did this survey. So it was clear to us that our street sweeping needed more work. That chimes with all the things we've gone through as a service, when we had to issue Veolia with a service improvement notice back in last year, because we were concerned with their standard of street sweeping, and we knew that it wasn't where it needed to be. So all of our focus has really been on that street sweeping part of the service. Next slide, please. We also did some specific targeted engagement with people who live in flats and live in flats above shops. So I've always thought that if our collection services don't work as well as they do for flats as they do for front doors, then it's not working, because you have lots of people who live in flats, and we're going to have more flats in the borough. We need to make sure that the collections from these places are working. So we wanted to get some deeper understanding of how people experience the service in flats. And some of the key things there were that, around receptacles, around they were saying that the council didn't help them to recycle. And that makes sense if you think about it. When you live in a communal block, if you're recycling but your neighbour isn't, it contaminates the whole thing, and then you get into a situation where there's lots of rubbish piling up. Next slide, please. So we did some other surveys around our Garth Road. We found that people quite liked the booking system, and I think it works well if you live in Garth Road. If you live in Lower Morden, you're not having to wait for cars backed up, and you're dealing with all the congestion there. Having the slots has meant that we've been able to control the flow of people coming in, and actually people that do get in find that they have a much better service because it's managed quite well. We also did some investigation around things like bulky waste collections and our neighbourhood recycling centres that are useful if you don't have a car and you can't get to Garth Road, but do attract fly tipping, which is a difficult balance for us to manage as a council. We currently clear them 3 times a week, but as soon as you're clearing it, you're getting more fly tipping. So there's a balance between, do we keep them or do we try and get rid of them and get rid of the fly tipping? It's quite tricky. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, some of the key findings was, that our street sweeping service really needs to improve. We've got quite a good satisfaction with our collections. Fly tipping is a massive issue. residents want to recycle, but they need more help in terms of knowing what to recycle and how. And the most unhappy people in the borough are people in South Wimbledon. And if anybody's ever been down Merton High Street, you will know why. There's lots of black sacks that come out from flats above shops and the businesses. And as I've said before, I've played buggy slalom around these black sacks myself when I was on maternity leave with my youngest son. And it's a lot of work we've been having to put in to improve it. And it has improved recently because we've had to put a lot of focus into that area. So we need to make further investments in flats and how we collect from there. Next slide, please. So what were the options for us? When we made the decision to cancel our contract, the second thing we did was just to look at, okay, what are the options for us in this service? How do we deliver this service? We kind of narrowed it down to 4 things. We didn't really have a preconceived idea about what we wanted to do. We just wanted to pick an option that we thought was the best way to deliver this service for Merton. So there's 4 options we considered. So commissioning out, which is what we currently have. So sending it out to the private sector, insourcing it and doing it ourselves, creating our own local authority trading company, which is setting up a whole board and having a director and it's set separate from the council, but the council owns that company, or creating a joint venture where you get another private sector provider and we go into partnership. Ultimately, though, we decided that next slide, please. So the way we assess these is we looked at things like the financial viability, which of course is very important, but given that the primary driver in the first instance was to save money and it didn't drive quality, we had to then factor in some other things. So can we deliver the service? Has the council got the technical capabilities to do it? How will it be implemented? And all of these things came together to create best value, which isn't just about money, it's about all the other things that come with it and how well we can deliver the service for people. Next slide, please. So ultimately, we factored it down to 2 options, which was contracting out or keeping in. And the reason we did that is because when you look at the other things like creating an arm's length or a joint venture, you ultimately have to then create a new director and a whole board, and it becomes a bit bureaucratic. And we really decided that we wanted to bring the service closer to people, not further away, and have more control of it, not less control of it. So putting up those barriers of bureaucracy wasn't something we wanted to do. So we assessed about contracting in and looking at the benefits of that, and there's also challenges around that in terms of cost and in terms of what technical capabilities we have. Next slide, please. And looking at contracting out, some of the benefits of that is that you can rely on the resilience of the market. So if you think back to COVID and you think back to what happened to our collections, actually this borough did very well. We still had our bins collected. There are councils across the country where that wasn't the case, where they had a significant disruption to their service. But because we were able to rely on the private sector, to rely on a bigger pool of drivers, we were able to keep the show on the road. And also when you think about the driver shortage, we've managed to get through that as well because we relied on that resilience of having that extra expertise outside of the council. So there's benefits to that, but one of going to the private sector, but one of the downsides is control and flexibility. So being able to respond to what our residents want very quickly without incurring additional costs that we haven't factored in. So next slide, please. So we did all our analysis and we came to the conclusion that we would contract out the waste service, that we had that resilience and that technical know-how. There are things that we want to do with the waste service around decarbonisation, that having access to that bigger spending power with the private sector will really help us build resilience within the service. But ultimately, if we want to control the street sweeping and we want to be responsive and we don't want to incur extra costs by reprofiling our schedules, bringing that in and controlling that is something we think is the best way forward. Next slide, please. So what the other thing we're going to be looking at and having to really hone in on, if you remember at the beginning of this discussion, I'd said that we had quite a baggy specification at the moment. What we're going to do is go through a process of making sure that the new specification for both the outsourced and the in-source service is very tight. We're going to go through a process with Cabinet to look at what additional things we want to put into that spec. And then we're going to go to scrutiny and ask, are we missing anything in this spec to make sure that we've got our all corners covered. So next slide, please. So the type of things we'll be looking at is increasing the frequency of certain areas, trying to prioritize sweeping after the bins have been collected rather than 2 days before, which sounds common sense, but once we control the service, we can do those things. and trying to just decide like when is it we want things to be swept? Do we want weekend sweeping? Do we want out of hours sweeping? So next slide, please. So the timeline then is we went to pre-decision scrutiny with this on the 13th. We made the decision on the 20th. So the officers now will go to the market to ask if they're interested. Now, there is a risk to this because it's quite an innovative approach. Most providers do both collection and sweeping, and they may not be interested in what we're proposing. And if that's the case, we'll have to rethink what we do. But we hope through soft market testing that we do have enough interest and that we'll be able to move forward. So officers will be doing that work, but we'll also be doing that work around the specification of the street sweeping. We'll do a whole year's worth of mobilization. We think it will take about a year to get things up and running. And then by 2025, we'll have a new service and it will all be fine and nothing will go wrong and it'll be perfect. Yeah, so that's the timetable. That's where we are. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And I promise I'll give you an honest answer. You might not like the answer, but it will be an honest answer. So please ask me any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Irons, for your very informative presentation. And we'll take the questions in threes. So Stephen, and are there any others? Ah, yes, Elspeth, and a third, is there a third one? Ah, yes, Pippa. Okay, then, yeah.
We could make them available. There's nothing confidential in them, so I'm happy to share them on the website. And we can, yeah. So, but there's no reason they can't be shared.
Thank you. Two quickies. When we first moved to Merton in 1991, there used to be the community skip scheme. I really feel if that were reintroduced, it would cut down significantly on fly tipping. And I wonder if that has been thought about, because I did put it when I did the survey, I did put that in as a comment. Also, when the Veolia service was first introduced, Mike Brunt, who was you in a previous life, said we would have the opportunity to move to slimmer wheelie bins in 2 years' time. That has never happened. I'd really like smaller wheelie bins.
So on the first point, two things are going to happen quite quickly, just kind of in response to the survey and in response to some of the work we've been doing. So I talked about flats above shops. Right now, we're changing how that happens. So every 6 months, people living in flats above shops will get sacks through their door rather than in a roll, and they have to order them, but they'll get them through the door, but also with a leaflet that says this is when your collection is, and they're going to get, we're going to increase the collections from 1 a week to 2 a week. And that means that we can then be very clear about when it should be out, and we can then enforce those time bans. So that's going to happen quite quickly, and it's started to happen now. Members should have got emails around areas in their boroughs where this will come into effect. The second thing that's going to happen is, I said this yesterday at Mitcham Community Forum, and it went down well, Garth Road on the road, where we're going to be taking the services of Garth Road closer to the community. So instead of just doing a community skip, what we're trying to do is take the service you get there where you can recycle bulky waste or just general waste and bring that closer to people who don't have access to a car and don't live close to Garth Road. So we're just looking at right now where we'll start that. It's going to be a pilot at first, so we can understand the costs and we can understand what's involved, but that's our aspiration. We kind of want to go one step further than just a big skip where we chuck everything in. You know, we did do that before and it was abused. It probably wasn't policed very well, but so this approach is where we get to police it. We'll go along 2 areas where there'll be staffed recycling, bulky waste recycling basically on the road. On the smaller wheelie bins, so the honest answer is I don't know. This is a good opportunity for us to review the receptacles that we have. We're sticking with wheelie bins to you know, be perfectly honest. We're not getting rid of them. Most councils are moving towards this now. We're kind of ahead of the curve in our collections. Thank you, previous leader Alan Brittis, for fighting for this. I know it was a tough battle, but it's well won. Thank you. So But there are things like food waste collection bins. We get complaints about foxes open them. Is it time to review how that works? I'm not, it all comes down to cost and how we do this really. If we start fiddling around with the size and shape of bins, we might end up incurring further costs, but it is a good time for us to review. I can't promise we'll give you slimmer bins, but I do promise to look at it at the very least.
I asked you yesterday about the use of the incinerator or energy recovery facility, whichever term one prefers. And you said that that will continue to be used. One thing I've been thinking about afterwards is where do the other three boroughs who've been part of the South London Waste Partnership figure in Merton's journey going forward, or can it not be said yet?
Well, as I said yesterday, so the difference, our relationship will change in the front end of stuff. So we procured this contract jointly and we managed it jointly. That was where some of the savings were made because it all got pulled in together. That's going to change. The recommendations that came forward to members was that we should all go our own way and create services that respond to the needs of our communities. What does work is the bulking, haulage and transportation side of it, so the back end. That all works and saves money because the more we pull that together, we get economies of scale through the tonnage. So we will continue to have a relationship in that regard. And I think that there might be efficiencies we can make with that relationship, but there's definitely that part will still work. So we'll still be working together.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the clarification.
Any other questions? Right, Leslie and are there two others? Lynn and a third person? No, so just Leslie and then Lynn. Okay, thanks.
Okay, I presume you haven't sent the tenders out yet for the new, right, because the word on the street from the street sweepers is that Biffa has got the job. Now, no, I'm just saying, I mean, I don't know where it's come from, just out of space probably, but they do believe that. But I'm wondering, you know, the access road between the car park at Sainsbury's and the shops behind there, got big Biffa bins. It's an absolute tip down there. I don't know who's responsible for it, but is that going to improve with your new lovely contract that you're going to send out, or the road sweepers?
So I will just respond to the first. There has been no decision made about, we haven't even put the spec together to put it out to tender, so it would be completely inappropriate to say anyone has been awarded anything. That's just not happened. Also, the street sweepers wouldn't know because that part would be coming in-house, not being contracted out. The bins you're talking about now, Biffa are active in the borough, but that's through commercial waste. So that will be businesses hiring that, because every business has to have a waste arrangement. So they're a commercial contractor and they have quite a lot of presence here for commercial waste. It's an enforcement issue if they're not being maintained. So I'm happy to take that over to the enforcement team and say, you need to send them. Well, I'll send an enforcement officer down there who can actually issue some fines. That was probably better because I won't be issuing them. But no, I'm happy to get the enforcement team to go and have a look and see what's going on back there.
I just want to say thanks, because since the meeting we had at Netley Gardens, the camera's gone up and the fly tipping has been 90% better. We hardly ever have to get the enforcements up there now to clear it up. However, the house round the corner, how many times have the enforcement officers got to go there before they start doing something about the landlord's HMO, take away the licence?
That's a really good question, but I think it'll end up going to our planning and housing team to look at how that property is being managed. I'm not sure how many visits have already been taken, so I don't know about that case, but I think we could look into it for you and try and see what's happened there.
Oh, right, Mr. Hart. Yeah.
There it goes. Just a whimsical one. We spent last year naming 2 new street sweepers. Do those belong to us or do they disappear?
I'm happy to tell you that I think it's Hayden and Mel Sweep are ours. They belong to us, so we'll be keeping them.
Are there any further questions for Councillor Irons? No? Well, okay. Well, thank you so much for your presentation, Natasha. Right, and next we move on to the open forum, and I believe Elspeth has got a question to ask.
Yes, it was one I've asked before, and I suspect the answer is going to be there's no movement. Does anyone know what is happening, A, with the supposed new build of the hospital at Belmont, but also the proposed collaborative working between St George's Hospital and St Helier Hospital, which has been proposed. It's all gone very quiet.
I've got a statement from Councillor McCabe, who's the Cabinet Member for Health, and he deals with St Helier in his portfolio, so I'll read that out. Now, the council remain deeply concerned that the decision to relocate services from the current site at St Helier to the site in Belmont will reduce access to essential health provision for residents of the borough, particularly those in the east of the borough. With the developing costs of living crisis and the impact this will have on household finances, the potential future impact of travel costs to get to the new site only increases this concern. The Cabinet, since very early in the life of the new administration, have been seeking answers from the senior leadership of the new Integrated Care Board, as well as from the Epsom and St Helier NHS Trust, both on whether there is an opportunity to further review previous decisions and whether the proposed new hospital remains affordable. There has been much speculation in the media about whether the new hospital programme is properly funded, and the council will continue to press hard for clarity on this point. We will also continue to stress the need for an alternative plan that protects and enhances the buildings and services at the current St Helier site, so that should, as appears increasingly likely, the national new hospital programme be delayed or discontinued, there is a plan B in place that ensures our residents can continue to access the high quality services they have a right to expect from the NHS. And I don't know if any of the other Cabinet members would like to make any comments on the matter. Stephen.
Yes, want to amplify, confirm and support my co-councillor from Ravensbury Ward and Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care and Hospital Issues, Councillor Peter McCabe, who's very experienced in these matters. And the worry is, and we will keep a close eye on this, that the government wants to proceed with an all singing, all dancing, huge hospital in leafy Belmont at the expense of where it's actually needed in Rose Hill, in St Helier. One of the issues that we can and will encourage residents to do is, if there is a planning application for a brand new hospital in Surrey, in Belmont, it does not preclude or prevent residents in another borough writing in and objecting, because the placing of that hospital away from the place of need is a local issue, and therefore we as councillors, certainly on this side, on the Labour side, will be urging residents in this borough to object in the strongest possible terms to any planning application for a brand new hospital in Belmont, which would denude the St Helier Hospital of its services. That is what we'll be doing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I understand, yeah, Pippa and Estebanus want to say something about the Centre for Independent Living.
My name is Stefanos Hapsalasi, and I'm the Vice Chair of Morden Centre for Independent Living. MSIL was founded in 2008 as a steering group led by disabled residents of Merton who wanted to create a deaf and disabled people's organisation that was for and controlled by them and that promoted the social model of disability. Since then, MSIL has grown and is now involved in 3 major policy areas: information and advice, challenging discrimination, and achieving change locally. Within information and advice, caseworkers work with services users one-on-one to help them claim benefits that they're entitled to, such as PIP, and also help them with applying for care packages. The service is currently oversubscribed, but we hope things will improve in light of the extra funding that we have received from the Civic Pride Fund. Independent of this, we recently began offering advocacy services with a focus of access to primary health, a need for which we identified in our strategic review that began last year. Our Challenging Discrimination project has seen us mentoring a number of DTPOs over the past few years through the Pan-London Disability Hate Crime Project to assist in developing their capacity in hate crime services based off our own experiences. We also do policy work through our Achieve Change Locally project. MSIL has been talking to our members about access issues that they face around Merton and have met with the developers of Centre Court to give our input about their plans. Our former policy director had been working hard to develop a relationship with the council directors and councillors on a range of issues, including direct payments, care packages, financial assessments, and housing. We will be looking to continue to build on his good work. MSIL also participates in policy forums, so we can listen and work with other DDPOs and individuals on issues from housing to the cost of living. For example, we are part of the Disability Poverty Campaign Group and the Fuel Poverty Task Force, and have written letters to MP and Treasury about government policy. We host a monthly craftivism session for members as well as non-members, where we discuss a topic important to us or make some art and crafts. It provides an opportunity for people to meet up. In December, we had one session about how people were affected by the cost of living crisis. One of the main issues facing disabled people in the past few years have been living through and continuing to live with is the consequence of the pandemic. MSIL has found that members have suffered from isolation and reduced care provision. Their mental health and sense of independence has suffered as a result. The knock-on effects continue as many carers as well as NHS workers have now left their jobs. Looking to the future, we are continuing to work on our strategic review to find what kind of services users want and how MSIL will be providing them going forward. I am particularly keen about MSIL starting work with younger people, which is something I hope which will happen in the near future. As Vice Chair and Trustee, I've come to realise how difficult it is for DTPOs to do all the things they could possibly do. There are so many directions you can go in, but never enough money or time to go in all of them. But as long as we, as well as DDPO sector in general, can do our utmost to remain in touch with the changing needs of our service users and closely monitor and anticipate changes and their consequences, we should do well, all with the goal of maintaining and improving the rights of disabled people to live independent lives and for them to continue to become an active part of society.
I'm going to continue on from what Stefanos has been describing. I wanted to just say, first of all, about the DDPO model, because a lot of people aren't familiar with it. essentially, it means that a certain percentage of the staff and a certain percentage of the trustees are deaf or disabled. And it's, well, as Stefanos has emphasised, it's really about services mainly run by deaf and disabled people for deaf and disabled people. It's about putting people in decision-making positions where they have important lived experience, which they can use to inform their decision-making. But I also wanted to say, sorry, a bit more about the organisation in terms of the casework that we do. I am one of the casework team. There's 5 of us all together, some full-time, some part-time. And we've already had a flavour of the kind of casework that we do. And I just wanted to flesh that out a bit more, because I think that it would be helpful for people here, including councillors, to understand that you can signpost people to us, you can recommend people to us to contact us themselves if they choose to. So basically, I'm going to just say about adult social care and our casework with that. Stefanos said that we help people to get care packages. I mean, specifically, they're called Care Act assessments. And we will support people to engage with the adult social care team at the council, not only to prepare for the assessment, because there's very specific eligibility criteria, but also part of the process is about financial assessment to see if somebody has to make personal contributions to their care package. And we assist people with that, particularly in terms of gathering evidence of what's known as disability-related expenditure. So basically, if people have any expenses to help to manage their health issues, and other people without those health issues don't face those, then arguably it's disability-related expenditure, and it should be taken into consideration when looking at their financial resilience to pay for their care in their own home. We also, as Stefanos has said, help people to negotiate the benefit system. So this can mean a benefit check where we're making sure that people are receiving everything to which they're entitled, but it also involves helping people to apply for a benefit in the first place. When the DWP reject a claim, as they often do, it goes to something called mandatory reconsideration. So we will help people to write their letters in that regard. If the DWP turn down the mandatory reconsideration, they then the claimant can choose to take it to first-tier tribunal level. So that's in the court, mainly in Sutton, and we support people with that process too. I was also going to say that with concessionary travel, which is a type of benefit mostly dictated by people in this very building, we try to help people to obtain the blue badges, the freedom passes, etc., that they need to get around. And with the housing, there's so many different issues with housing. It's mainly helping to report and hopefully find a solution for disrepair. There's also getting aids and adaptations into people's places. It could be applying for a disabled facilities grant. But by far, the biggest concern is people living in unsuitable accommodation that is literally putting their physical and mental health at risk. And as I'm sure a lot of people in this chamber are aware, we have a huge number of households on the housing register and a lack of truly accessible housing. So that's probably one of our trickiest areas, but we've had such high demand, and that's why we have a 12-week waiting list at the moment, and why, as Stefanos has said, we're very pleased to have received some civic pride funding so that we can employ another caseworker to try to get through the work more. I was just going to say one final thing, if that's okay, Caroline? Yeah, which is that Stefanos mentioned that our
former policy manager, Michael, has been trying to establish certain relationships with important people within the council. I helped him in as much that I attended meetings with the head of housing needs and strategy, talked with the parking man, Gareth, I can't remember his specific title, about access issues there, like pavement parking. We are talking with the principal social worker. We're talking with the direct payments and financial assessment manager to try to understand council processes better and for them to understand our work better and hopefully make some influence effectively, shall we say. So that's it. Please go to our website if you want to know more. Please call us if you want to know more, or text us, email us, whatever. Please recommend that people come to us. If they are deaf and disabled and they live in Merton, they can access our service and it is entirely free.
Oh. Well, thank you, Elspeth and Stefanos and Pippa for your contributions. It was all very interesting and informative. Is there anyone else who has a contribution to make? Oh, yes, Bob.
Well, first, I need to thank the chair for indulgence and Chris Whittington, of course. Also, I need to apologise to all attendees because I don't speak in public normally. I'm not shy exactly, but I just can't speak properly in public. So I seek your indulgence in the attendees as well. A few years ago, prior to the pandemic, I gave a presentation here on a judicial review. That judicial review has now progressed, and statements being made elsewhere, and lectures being made elsewhere, and the interpretation that also has taken place elsewhere, which is quite extraordinary, really. But I wanted to say, because nobody would entertain me giving a lecture at their own expense, I need to hire a hall at my own expense to give a presentation on that lecture about this subject. So this is just to say, if anyone's interested in coming, please give their names to Chris Whittington, the chair, and their email address, and I'll send an invitation. But I need to hire a hall publicly, privately, at my own expense to present this, because it's that serious. It's very, very serious. It not only affects this borough and London, it's nationwide. That's all I've got to say. Thanks very much.
Oh, thank you for that, Bob. Right, well, oh, right, yes, Mr. Hart, you wanted to say something.
I just want to thank the MSIL. They helped my son a lot about a year ago on a project where they're providing legal advice. Unfortunately, the funding for that finished, which left him bereft because it was so supportive. And I just encourage them to keep going. And if they can get that project back, it would be great.
Right, that's great. Thank you all. Sorry. Yeah, right. Okay. And oh, yes, Bob, is there one quick thing you wanted to say? Right. Okay. Well, thank you all for your contributions. And now we turn to Barbara Gorner, who's going to give us a presentation about Dorset Hall.
Hello, everybody. My name's Barbara Gorner. I'm not a councillor, but I do live in Merton, and been called lots of names. Probably the least bad is interfering old bag for getting involved in Merton Park, where I don't live and I don't belong. We actually live on Cottenham Park Road, so you can find me quite easily. The reason I got involved with Dorset Hall is during lockdown, I kept driving past this sorry-looking building on the Kingston Road, and it's quite interesting listening to your presentation about rubbish. When I finally drove in, there was something about the building was pulling me in, there was a lot of rubbish around. And I will say well done to Merton, because I did ring up and within 48 hours, the bins had actually been emptied and they were communal bins. So well done for that. Dorset Hall is an old house from about 1736. It was picked up by Clarion as an accident, really. They bought it when they took over their housing in Merton. And I started looking into the history of the house, and probably a lot of you will know that it was actually owned at one time by Rose Lamartine Yates, who's quite an undervalued suffragette. She wasn't very much on the national radar, although she should have been. She kind of fell by the wayside in a lot of names of importance of suffragettes. So I started looking in through the windows and I took some photographs, and I thought, this is dreadful because the place has actually been occupied by squatters. The rubbish was left inside for many years. So we got in touch with Clarion. This is my husband, by the way, Simon Hood, who's been a tremendous support. And his grandfather actually was MP for Wimbledon in 1918. And ironically, you probably know his name from a few playing fields and so on, Joseph Hood.
Oh.
So that's my, my grandfather-in-law, as it were. So Simon has been doing a lot of the work, most of the time managing what I do and trying not to let me get too much out of control on what I'm doing. The scorched earth policy, which I tend to go for, which is not always the best thing to get done. Anyway, we do have here a bit of a brochure of the work we've been doing on Dorset Hall. And we've managed to save the building. I'm not going to speak for very long, because anybody who wants to ask me a question, they can. I set up Dorset Hall Group. We have 5 local members, including Faith in Action, who've been tremendously helpful with introductions. And we managed to save the building through pushing Historic England and others to get involved. The roof has been repaired. We raised all the funding through works ourselves. We raised £750,000 to save the building. And this isn't through public money, and it's not through Merton money. So essentially, we decided to see if we could put this building back on the map. As I say, roof is repaired, and hopefully there will be a future for the building. We're looking for a community group to take it over now that it's watertight, windproof, and so on. But it's a very expensive to upkeep. It is listed, it's grade 2 listed. Last week, Historic England went in with Merton Conservation Officer, Jill Tyndale, to see what could be done. And there's also an extremely fine ceiling from 1730, very rare ceiling, and the house really ought to be the pride of Merton, because Rose, I don't think many people know this, actually was a very good friend of Emily Wilding Davison. And this is not generally known in the press or nationally. And Emily Wilding Davison, suffragette killed on the King's Horse, was at Dorset Hall the day before she was knocked over at the Derby. And Rose's husband actually represented the family at the inquest. And she certainly wasn't a suicide. On the day of the, she was knocked over, the first press reports actually said that she tried to grab the reins and pull down the King's Horse. The newspapers turned it into a suicide/martyrdom. And ever since, it really annoys me, the newspapers keep repeating the same old lie, but Rose's husband, Tom Yates, actually got a verdict, and I can't remember exactly what, I think it was accidental death, something like that. So the house is incredibly important, not just as it's grade 2 listed, but also for the suffragette movement. So, and Rose was an organizer of Emily's funeral. She also locally, she set up food banks and so on near Centre Court, because that area is all knocked down. So she's a really important woman, if you like, of passion and social work for the borough. And I'm just hoping to get some support from community groups who will work with us to take things to the next stage, because obviously Simon and I don't know how to run, we can do sort of nudging people in a certain direction, but we have no idea how to run a community group or anything like that. So what the ask is for us today is we've managed to keep the house from falling down. Now we need others to get involved and take the project forward. And obviously we will stay involved, as are Clarion. And Clarion in the end did come to the table. They've obviously got a lot of bad press, which I have read, but in the end, they did repair the roof and did what was necessary. But it's been a bit of a slug, and I'm happy to take any questions. And if you want to have a look at any of the drawings, that we have a very fine architect on our team called Hugh Morgan, come and have a look. We've got some detail here. Thank you. Thank you for hearing me.
Oh, has anyone got any questions, Barbara or Simon? Yes, Councillor Donnymore.
Could I just say a big thank you on behalf of the community for all of your work on this, and I'm sure it wasn't an easy effort to get all of this action going, so thank you very much.
Answered very quickly. It was like pulling teeth.
Leslie.
I'm just wondering, before Clarion took over all the housing stock in the borough, why the council were not ensuring that this building was looked at properly. And since Clarion have taken over, why are they being so retarded about looking after the property?
It was used actually by the council, I believe, for single men's housing until 2016. So it was used. Then, of course, it was found not to be fit for purpose because it didn't meet various standards, which I don't know what the standards are, but it didn't meet standards. It wasn't fit for purpose. I think it had internal kitchens and things like that, and the rules changed. So the building was closed up. Then it was occupied by squatters. And after that, there was COVID. So that's really what happened. So we had to basically take on Clarion during COVID, which was a fun game. But luckily they have come around, and Historic England finally come around after 2.5 years. So I think they're on board, but Clarion do want to sell the building. So where we are, I don't know, we've no interest in buying the building. I just wanted to stop it falling down because I felt it was a historic landmark that should be kept for Wimbledon and Merton.
Right, has anyone, oh yes, Pippa.
I also wanted to say a big thank you as well. I came to learn of Dorset Hall's history because there was a play a few years ago in a scout hall, I believe, in Rains Park. It was brilliant. It were only a few members, but it really focused on Rose Lamartine Yates, and particularly as the cycling suffragette. So, and I'm aware that Merton Active Travel, which I'm part of, a grassroots group, we're also talking about whether that can be used as cycling hub or something to help improve cycling in the borough. So yeah, in the main it's a thanks, and I would like to talk to you more.
Yes, the cycling is certainly one of the options for community use of the building, amongst others. I think the ones that we're most interested by are obviously getting women's wellness and women's social issues dealt with in some way or the other. The big problem is obviously paying for it, and that's the biggest issue. But certainly we are in touch with the Heritage Lottery Fund, and that's clearly a potential source of funding for the building, at least the fabric of the building, and then hopefully for community use as well. I mean, I think people may not be aware, but the National Trust, we brought them in
and they have project managed quite a detailed options appraisal where a series of specialist contractors were brought in, architects, quantity surveyors, business consultants, and we have quite a comprehensive report now on, you know, what the potential sources of revenue are, what the costs of redoing the building are, and also looking at potential uses for it. So a lot of the groundwork has been done. It's a question of now the next stage of development.
Which we're happy to provide.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Right. Well, thank you, Simon and Barbara. That's been a very enlightening talk on your journey, and long may it continue. And we hope to see this cycling hub would be great, and also something to recognise Rose Lamartine-Yates's great efforts. Right, moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is the future engagement, and Chris is going to talk about it. But before he does, I'd like to just thank him for all the work he's done for the community forums. He was at one last night and he's at this one tonight, and he does all the community forums around the borough in Wimbledon, Mitcham, Rains Park, Morden, Collier's Wood. So over to you, Chris.
I'd wait till I finish before you clap, but that's lovely, thank you. Yes, not often I get to speak out loud at these, so this is a bit different for me. But I wanted to bring to all the forums over this sort of spring round our thoughts and plans for how we're going to improve how we engage with our residents across Merton. So we were looking at change as part of lockdown and our experience of running the Your Merton programme. We learned a lot about how we could do data engagement differently, particularly on issues around doing things digitally. If you recall, we had to do a lot of stuff online because we couldn't put people in a room like this, and we couldn't do things with post-it notes, which is the fun stuff I usually like to do. So we had to learn a lot about different techniques and different methods. We also did a review of community forums. We did that about this time last year, and thanks to anyone who took part in that and gave us their feedback. That was really helpful to understand, both from people who came to the meetings, but also importantly, people who didn't, why they didn't come. We also did a look at what all of the other boroughs are doing across London and elsewhere, to look at different approaches that were available and what we could borrow from and what would work locally. There's also a parallel piece of work called How We Work with Communities that colleagues in the policy team are doing, and they are looking at how we work primarily with the voluntary sector and move around a lot more around co-production and involving people at a much earlier stage. And what we're doing runs in parallel with that and trying to do it. I should say that we are primarily here looking at the corporate team, and team is used loosely in the sense there's 1.5 of us, so it's pretty much the minimum requirement for a team. Whereas there is lots of good work going on across the organisation in other areas that specialises, for example, children and young people. There's the excellent youth participation team that organises young advisors and youth parliament. Within adult social care, there's teams that look after, liaising with their user groups. So this is not really about their work, but what we do supports their work sometimes, so it relates to it. So we're proposing to make changes in 3 key areas. Face-to-face engagement, things like tonight, engaging what I call civic society, and I'll talk a bit more about what I mean by that, upgrading our digital offer, and to do all of those, we're going to need to increase our capacity to meet that demand. So on face-to-face, the feedback we got from the community forums really told us that, well, I kind of already knew, that the forums are basically both too big and too small. So they are not big enough to drive big audiences, to get genuine engagement, to be sufficiently high profile, but at the same time, they're too big to be of interest to those who've got a very particular local interest. So they don't match, the very neighbourhood level of engagement. So they're not big enough in terms of scale, but they're also, too big for that level of engagement. So what we're proposing to do is to do 2 events in each area each year that are much higher profile. One, looking at a sort of question time format with local service leaders, that could be the council leader, NHS leaders, other services, whoever we can Shanghai, independently chaired. I did say at scrutiny that the example we're looking there is the Mayor of London's question time. Those are chaired by Nick Ferrari or someone from LBC. I'm not quite sure we'll get that glamorous. I don't think we can afford his fees. But we'd look for someone equivalent locally who would be willing to take part in that. So make a song and dance about those, make those a big event, give you the opportunity to quiz those local leaders about what's going on in the area. The other event each year would be a community forum, but not in this format where it's speaker questions. What we want to do is use a different technique, something like a citizens' assembly type approach, where it's residents talking to each other and coming together to work out what those solutions are, around those local issues. That could be something as big as climate change, or it could be something as related to town centres, or something even more local. But it will be supported and facilitated. Outside of those 2 meetings, we'll look to support other local activities. So with some parts of the borough, they're meeting more frequently than twice a year already. I may want to continue doing that, and we would support that. What we won't do is enforce a sort of one-size-fits-all. We'll look at what's the right solution for each area and work with councillors, work with local groups to come up with those bespoke solutions. So in many areas, there's already an effective resident association, and Merton Park's a good case in point, which gets much better numbers than we do here. And so where there are organisations already doing a better job, I think we need to get out of the way and work out how we can best support those groups. So there'll be different arrangements in different areas depending on those needs. And related to that is that what I call that civic society. So this is those residents groups, friends groups, tenants groups, and we found through COVID that there were lots more of these springing up that weren't formal, that weren't structured with constitutions and bank accounts, but were WhatsApp groups or other informal structures where people could collaborate and were talking to their neighbours. We historically, I don't think, have a good enough record on working with those types of arrangements. And I think we've got there's a clear case for us to try and build trust and better communication channels with those groups. We certainly found that it was a really effective method of building things like COVID champions, again, based on WhatsApp and based on regular meetings with those groups, to be able to get key messages out that we needed to do to reach parts of the community that our normal channels of communication don't reach. So we want to build those relationships. So part of that work will involve mapping who's out there doing what. Is it a really structured organisation? Is it one person in their kitchen? Is it a formal structure or an informal? And I suspect lots of the local councillors in the room will know those groups and know those arrangements, so we can tap into that and build up that knowledge, and that will be an ongoing task. But we'll be able to provide a designated contact at the council. They'll be able to reach out to. They've got questions about issues that, or want to find out who to speak to about something. We'll be able to do that. We'll develop a bespoke e-newsletter for those groups. So we can give them an idea of what's coming up, what's going on, what events might be of interest. And we want to try and bring them together. I think for a lot of these groups, they work in their own turf and don't know what's happening 2 wards over, and probably would benefit from learning from each other and being able to talk and have that discussion. So we're proposing to try and have an annual meeting, quite informal, bring people together and have a discussion that they can start to build those relationships amongst each other. So eventually, if they're doing all the communications amongst themselves and we're not, that's perfect. That's what we like to get to. On our digital offer, at the moment, we have a consultation hub. If you're not familiar with it, it's merton.gov.uk/consultations. We list all our live consultations on there and all our closed ones as well. And you can get alerts for when new stuff comes up. There's also a survey tool, a design tool attached to that, and we do quite a lot of online surveys. But we've learned through doing some of the other digital tools over the last couple of years, there's a lot more out there, and we need to up our game considerably. So some of the things we'd like to bring in Mapping, we did that through COVID, where we used a tool where people could put a point on a map and tell us about that area and location, and that kind of geographical analysis is really helpful and important. So we'd like to build something around that. Dialogue functions, again, Mayor of London, other boroughs have these where people can get into discussion boards amongst themselves. The challenge with those is A, moderation, and B, analysis. It can be an awful lot of text, and we're not resourced to sit and read it all. But there are now AI products and other systems on the market that do the analysis for you and can also do some of the moderation element as well, or flag up things. So that's one of the things we want to look at. And then finally, we want to look at building a residence panel. This is a tool that's used quite widely, and I used to do it on paper about 1,000 years ago, but now it's done digitally, where you recruit a pool of maybe 1,000 residents, 500, 1,000, something like that, and can regularly go back to them and say, with the different issues, be it council tax rates, be it satisfaction with services, be it climate change, or whatever those issues are. Previously, for the last decade and a half, in fact more than that, probably about 20 years, we've commissioned a resident survey where we've got a social research provider going out, knocking on doors, and interviewing 1,000 adults. That's a very expensive way of doing things, and we only do it every couple of years. So it gives us a very short snapshot of what's going on, and it often raises more questions than it answers, because we don't know. They tell us they're unhappy about something, but we don't know why. So this tool should hopefully give us the option to dig that bit deeper. If we find out there's a problem, we can interrogate a bit further and get that why as well as that what. So it'll give us more flexibility. So to achieve all that, which is quite a lot, we're looking at bringing in 2.5 new posts, an events manager to manage those kind of those large-scale events, and put those on and make them work really well. A community development officer who will do that liaising with those civic society groups and be that point of contact for them. And then at the moment, we've got a 0.5 engagement officer, so we'll recruit the other half of that. And they'll be responsible for that digital platform and for the kind of business as usual consultations that we do. In any given year, we can do about 150 consultations as an organisation. There's a lot of work that goes on anyway, and that will still carry on, but we'll have more tools in our armoury to be more flexible and to reach different audiences, which is critical for us. So where we're at the moment, these proposals went to overview scrutiny at the end of January. We got some really positive feedback from that. That was really good. Obviously, I'm touring community forum meetings because I tour all community forum meetings anyway over the spring round. So we've got we had Mitcham last night. We've got Wimbledon and Rains Park later in the spring. We'll then look at starting the recruitment and procurement processes to get those new officers in and a new digital platform. Final decision will go to cabinet, we think, in June, with a view then to having the whole new structure in place for the autumn. So if that all goes to plan, this would be the last Morden Forum in this format, but there would be Morden Forums again, but with a different approach to it. So I have to take any questions.
Yes, Bob.
Thanks very much, Chris. From where did those ideas emerge?
Some from my brain, but looking at what other people were doing and borrowing. So we looked at all the different models that are used around London, how they're resourced, and sort of good practice that's going on elsewhere. Looked at what we were doing, looked at where the shortfall is, looked at what is resourceable. We came out with a series of options, and we discussed that with our cabinet member, Councillor Stringer, and went with a model that we thought would work best for them.
Pippa.
Thanks, Chris. Can I ask any particular thoughts on the council's Twitter account and the fact that people don't tend to get responses when they tag Merton Council? And I'm not saying that Merton Council should respond to every tweet, by the way. I know that that's not entirely appropriate, but I think I've seen since I've moved here in 2013. Okay, I didn't get on Twitter immediately, but I've probably seen only like 2 times when the councillors responded to someone's question on Twitter.
Yeah, that sort of sits with colleagues. It's definitely more than that because I've done it more than that. They do give me the keys to Twitter, and so I will be checking in and doing stuff. It varies based on capacity. Our customer service team is not on Twitter; it's a communications team. So the technical stuff about individuals and their issues with a particular bin collection, there's not much we can do other than signpost them to the system to report it to, because we don't have access to that system. So it tends to be if I see a question I know the answer to, I will respond and say, well, here's the answer.
Yeah, Leslie.
Can I just add to what Pippa's just said? There are some people who are blocked on Twitter by certain councillors. I've been blocked, and I know some other people have been blocked as well. Is this a very professional sort of attitude to take to their own constituents?
That's not. I'm not involved in councillor standards in that way, so it's not something I can comment on.
Yes, Stephen.
Hi, Chris. I'm intrigued by the panel, and I know this isn't really the stage to talk about lots of detail, but I'm wondering about, is it voluntary? Is it chosen demographically appropriately? Are people incentivized to participate? How do you actually make a 1,000 people a representative in any sort of way?
There are as many ways of doing it as there are days of the week. The most common is you send out a randomly selected invitation list or invitation based on address files. So to get 1,000 people, you probably need to send out 10, 15,000 invites, and you'll get that kind of number come back. There's then an ongoing job of people dropping out and you having to replace them. And equally, the longer someone's on a panel like that, the less representative they get because they get more knowledgeable and they're used to the feedback. So you end up having to replenish people over time. So yeah, it's quite a complex process. To get it representative, you have to understand the demographics, on which demographics are less likely to come back, and then you skew your invitations accordingly. So we know traditionally, every time we do a consultation, we get less responses from the east of the borough than we do from the west. So if we were just sending out those 15,000 invites, we'd probably split it 5,000 west and 10,000 east. And that, and again, a lot of the groups which are more likely to be underrepresented live more in the east. So you get it that way, but everyone would then fill in a response that tells us their demographics. You then know what your 1,000 sample is like, and then you can even weight that if it's not quite as representative as it needs to be. So yeah, there are tools and ways to do it. It depends on what product we end up going with and how that's administered. So the detail is to be defined, but they can be very effective tools. But if you want really nerdy answers, give me a call and you'll be bored to tears.
Yes, Bob, with you.
Once more, thanks, Ed. I'm rather intrigued by this camera. This screen is going all over the place. I'd like to know where the cameras are and who's operating them.
They're automatic. They're based on where the microphone comes on.
Right. Well, if has anyone else got any other comments to make or any questions or any issues you want to raise? No. Right. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. It's been. Oh, sorry, Elspeth.
I just wanted to say a big thank you to Morden Social Services on behalf of my elderly sister who had a nasty fall at the end of December, fractured hip and elbow. She's 85. Social services here have been magnificent. And I'd just like to say a big thank you. We had our first visit from Jackie of Social Services at 6 o'clock on a Sunday evening in a cold January day. Now, how many people would do that? They're just fantastic. And I can't praise them enough. So big thank you. And please tell Jack McCabe.
Right. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and all have a safe